Welcome to topic 5, sourcing risk management and mitigation. So here's the introduction for this topic, and as we normally do, we have a quote, and this quote comes from Warren Buffett. Risk comes from not knowing what you're doing. Has that ever happened to anybody? It was more risky because you had no idea what you were doing? Think about it when you perhaps were first learning how to drive a car. Your parents or somebody might have taken you to a huge open parking lot where there was no one else there. Well, because you didn't know what you were doing, they were trying to mitigate the risk by putting you in an environment where there was not much you can hit. But today, if you've learned how to drive, you may be more confident, and the risk of you damaging your vehicle or hurting somebody or yourself is lower. So in today's world, we have a lot of things that we're learning for the first time almost on a daily basis. So there's a lot of risk out there. So why should you care about risk? Well, disruptions come in all shapes and sizes. And then disruptions can occur any place, anytime in your supply chain. So we recently seen this in the world events today. Think about it. There was so much disruption because of the pandemic. Supply chains stopped because factories stopped because they wanted to protect their workers and closed. That meant less product was moving around the world. Then there was actual movement restrictions in some areas where people had to stay home unless it was for very specific reasons that they could leave. So think about that. So disruptions are dramatic and devastating. So think about this pandemic and the impact on the restaurant industry or the hotel industry. It's been devastating for some of them. It seems like on the news every day you hear about companies closing or they're reducing their footprint overall because they just don't have the sales or the income. So they need to close up. And then there's going to be some disruptions that will never make the news. Or they don't make the news in general. For example, a car accident, a truck versus a car. Well, that truck might have been delivering to the local store, but that disruption delayed the delivery because the police had to come. There might have been injuries, but would that make the news? Most of the time it wouldn't, because it's a car accident. So you have to think about the size of these. And you have to be concerned about all of them. You got to do the what if situations. You have to do the sensitivity analysis on everything. So we need to constantly scan the world. For example, my wife saw what was happening with the pandemic when it first started, and she had me stock up on certain supplies. So when the stores ran out of certain supplies, we had enough because she had the foresight to say, oh wow, this is going to really impact us, and the next time you go to the store, pick up some extra of this. So I did it, and I agreed with her when she told me what her thoughts were, and we did that. And some companies did that too because they knew what was going to happen, because they were scanning the world. They were actively scanning. They were scanning the environment. So they were not passively scanning. So risks, they're everywhere. And on the screen you have several different risks here. For example, severe weather. Well, how is this severe weather a risk? Well, it could be a risk if you have an outdoor water park. Severe weather, let's say, is a thunderstorm. Well, water and lightning are not things that go together, so you have to close. That might mean you don't have the sales from tickets, entry tickets, that you may have had before. And that's just one example. So what about port congestion or work stoppages? If you're a company that relies on imported goods and that port has a work stoppage, well, what's happening to your product? Is it sitting on the port, or is it sitting on the ship to get offloaded from the port? If there's a work stoppage, is the ship even going to stop at the port because they can't offload in time to move on to their next location? They might skip and offload materials at the next stop and somehow work it their way back. Well, that might mean a week delay of your products, or it could mean a month delay or 2 months. What about terrorism? Well, currently, to kind of go along with terrorism would be, let's say, rioting or protests. Currently, there's some protests going on in the United States, and that is extremely disruptive because property is being damaged. Business can't continue as normal because of these activities. And it doesn't seem like there's an overt effort to stop it. It seems like everybody's tolerating it. Well, business owners are not tolerating it because they're not making money, which might mean that they need to lay off personnel or close. They may have to file insurance claims because of the damage. Now, regardless of what the terrorism's cause is, the protest cause is, or rioting, their reason, it is a risk when it comes to the supply chain. So these are just a couple out of the possible ones that are out there. So think about this when we're getting more into risk. What could possibly go wrong? So think about that in your own life. Think about your day. Think about all the possibilities that could have happened but didn't happen. You might be surprised to learn that there's a lot of risk that you avoided, maybe because you knew what you were doing, or maybe because you got lucky, or maybe the Murphy's Law didn't decide to jump up and bite you today. Murphy's Law is if it can go wrong, it will. So maybe you got lucky. But let's go ahead and move on to risk management, which is our next video.